after October 7th, there are a number of things that we need to reevaluate as a Jewish community living in North America, and particularly in the States. What are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? What can we do better? And one of those things, which I think is vital in terms of the next generation of Jews, is transforming Jewish education. So before Dr. Naya and I engage in conversation, I'll invite Naya to unmute herself and introduce a presentation to begin with. And everyone else, please mute yourselves. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Can you all hear me? Yes?
Yes.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much to Cantor Eyal Bitton for inviting me. Really, thank you so much. I feel very honored because one of my mandates that I've given myself is to help Jewish people be proud and stand up with shoulders back as proud Jews. So yes, my name is Naya Lekht, and before I have made a small presentation, a slide deck, but before I do that, I just want to give you a little bit of a background, who I am and how I came to this field, which is Jewish and Zionist education. I come from a Russian speaking family. I was born in the former Soviet Union, and this is important because while I did not experience Soviet anti-Semitism, which was anti-Zionism already in the late 60s and 70s, my family did, and I learned, and one of the reasons that we came here is because of the institutional anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism in the Soviet Union. And when I came to the United States, as I said, I did not encounter it until I went to university as an undergrad. And I went to university, I'll date myself a bit, in 2001. I was an undergraduate in the Bay Area at UC Santa Cruz. And what I think happened was that there were two world events that collided and really galvanized, not in a good way, anti-Semitism. And that was the Second Intifada, which is a violent uprising against the Jewish people in Israel and Israelis, and the 9/11 and the terrorist attack against America. These two events collided and produced a really ugly variant, more modern variant, and I do like an anti-Semitism too, a virus, more modern variant of anti-Semitism known as anti-Zionism. And so when I saw it, I was only 19, 18 years old. I was not a historian or a scholar, but I saw what I saw. I knew it wasn't wrong. I knew it was anti-Semitism. I knew because of what my family would tell me they were experiencing in the Soviet Union. And one of the things that was the most, I think, challenging and disheartening was that when I went to Jewish professionals on campus to raise the alarms, to talk about this isn't criticism of Israel. This is absolute anti-Semitism, Jew hatred. What I got were two really alarming responses. One was, this is just anti-Zionism, and anti-Zionism is just political disagreement, and this is a freedom of speech situation. And the second, even I think worse response was, stay quiet, it'll blow over, don't say anything. This kind of what I call now, I think, a prototype, a Jewish prototype in the diaspora, the Jew who remains silent, who doesn't want to call attention to himself, the Jew who prefers not to stick his neck out. And so they even told me, they kind of threatened me, the Jewish professionals, that if I'm going to make a big deal about it, a big stink, I'm going to actually endanger the well-being of Jewish students on campus. And many of you are nodding your heads because this is the rhetoric coming from campus administrators and even Jewish professionals. And so it's been 20 plus years, and they're wrong. They're dead wrong. It did not blow over. And we realize that anti-Zionism is not just political disagreement. This isn't an issue of that. And I wish I were the one who was sitting here and saying I was wrong, right? I really do. But what I've witnessed and what I have been witnessing, this surge, the snowball effect, and it's gotten to the point where we're now sitting here after October 7th, and we're asking ourselves, what should Jewish education look like after the event that was the darkest, the most violent event waged against the Jewish people since the Holocaust? And with that, I just want to start sharing my screen and really address that that question: what should Jewish education, what could Jewish education look like after October 7th? Here's what Jewish education has been looking like so far. So before we ask what it should look like, I'd like to talk about what Jewish education has presented itself. And it's presented itself in the manifestation of what I call almost an obsessive desire to talk about Jewish values. So like tzedek, like tikva, like chesed, tikkun olam, all these values. So as a kid, I went to a Jewish day school. My parents were from the former Soviet Union, but they sent me to a Jewish day school, a conservative and then a reform middle and high school. And I remember like a tapestry. These words were on the walls of our schools or the synagogues. Tzedek, tzedek tirdof, right? Justice, justice shall you pursue, and tikkun olam, and chesed, and refuah, and all these beautiful values. And so what Jewish institutions and educators were hoping is that through these Jewish values, by osmosis, Jews would become proud, and Jews would become kind, and Jews would become people who repair the world. But what actually ended up happening, and I'm really sorry to say that, is that these values have actually given our Jewish youth ammunition to now side against Israel. And it's like, how did that happen, right? How could something like justice or tikkun olam, which is a beautiful concept, have contributed to educational malpractice within the Jewish world? And the reason is that if you just step aside for a moment and think of tzedek, justice. Christians also practice tzedek, justice, and so do Muslims, and so do atheists, actually. What about chesed, kindness, or repairing the world, what we now is social justice? So these are very universal values, and there's nothing really particularly Jewish about them, actually. And so what you see is this, as I say again, this obsession with justice. Tzedek, tzedek tirdof, tzedek, tzedek tirdof, and it was even used during the BLM movement, which, sorry, I'm at a school, so there's a bell, my apologies. So it was used as a permission slip to support movements that actually have a lot of anti-Semitism. One second, I'm going to mute myself. Okay, there you go. I apologize. But here's the thing and I want to really make sure that we all understand. The sentence tzedek tzedek tirdof, when I found out that only recently that actually it comes from a much longer tractate. It's not justice, justice shall you pursue, period. It's, let's read it together. Justice, justice shall you pursue, that you may thrive and occupy the land that I, Adonai Hashem, have given unto you. So it is not about justice. It is about how to rule as sovereigns on the land that God gave you. And it means, what does it mean to rule as sovereigns? And so we've completely kind of misunderstood. Sorry, again, I apologize. One moment. We've completely misunderstood the entirety of that passage, that it isn't just justice, universal justice. It actually is very particular. So to move back to this obsession with these universal values, chesed, kindness, but I could argue that chesed is a value for Christians as well, right? Why is it just a Jewish value? Why? And atheists also practice chesed, do they not? And so what is it that we have been getting wrong in many ways? Why is it that these values have actually contributed to a problem of actually not making Jews more proud of Jews, of themselves, but actually coming on board of social justice movements? Is there a class now? I don't know. I'm at school and they gave me this room and now these students are coming in. So I may have to move rooms. I apologize to everyone today.
That's okay.
And so is it how is it that this has happened? And so what we have to ask, and I, as an educator who build out curriculums and I practice something called backward design method, meaning what are my educational goals? What is it that I want our Jewish youth to look like in 20 years from now, or even today? I think it's about Jewish identity. And the question we have to ask ourselves, do Jewish values get us to Jewish identity? Do Jewish values get us to Jewish identity? So I want educated Jews. And what I mean by educated Jews, Jews who know the history of the Jewish people, proud Jews, Jews who are proud of their history, who do not apologize for their existence. And three, advocates. I want Jews who not just know a lot, but are able to articulate confidently and express their positions. And of course, I want, of course, good people, but this I put in brackets, this I believe is not an educational goal, right? This is much more of a goal within the family, within yeshivot, within synagogues. But sometimes, as you can see, you could use these values, such as chesed and tikkun olam and tzedek tirdof. Do they actually produce good people? And which leads me to, what is it that we should be teaching? I think we should be teaching about Jewish history and Jewish indigeneity. Our Jewish kids have no clue where the term Palestine comes from. They have no clue that there was once an area known as Judea. I do a lesson all around this coin. This coin was minted by the Romans in 70 AD after they pillaged and exiled the Jewish people from Jerusalem. That entire coin can be a lesson in itself. It's an artifact. It's an archaeological artifact, right? We read, it says Judea capta. What is Judea? And the students have to go and research. Oh, by the way, we also, as Jews, Yehudim, we have a linguistic tie to the land, Yehuda, Yehudim, right? So we talk about our identity is linguistically tied to the land of Israel. Also, you cannot capture something that is not, you can only capture something that is not yours, which means that what was Judea? Oh, it was a sovereign Jewish kingdom. That's important, right? So I stress in my education, in order to get my goals, proud Jews, Jews who are very well versed in Jewish history. Okay? And so at the end, I don't know if you guys know about this, that Israel minted a coin in 1953. What is this coin? It's Israel Liberata. Israel has been liberated. But what's so amazing about this coin is that it shows that Jews don't just have a history, we have a shared memory, what I call collective memory. And this is kind of where I want to end, which is, I think we need to, my prescription educationally is moving away from Jewish values, not saying that we shouldn't teach them, but if we want to get into Jewish identity, we have to move away from Jewish values per se and into collective memory. Now, why do I say collective memory? Because the makers of this coin are in dialogue with this coin. Whoever minted this coin, and we know it was the state of Israel, was conscientious of the trauma inflicted on the Jewish people. It's our trauma, it's our story when we were kicked out of our ancestral homeland. This is, and so when I do a lesson for teens and college students, we start with this coin. I ask them to do research it. I ask them to research Judea. Who captured it? Who do you think these people are? So it's kind of an investigative research assignment. And then I reveal this coin at the end and I ask them, why do you think that Israel would make such a coin? Because we have collective memory, the Jewish people. We remember that it's Tisha B'Av, right? The day that we mourn the destruction of the Second Temple. It's also the day that we mourn a loss of sovereignty. And I keep on using that word sovereignty because I think it's so important. It's not that the Jews just lived there, it's that they were the writers of their own destiny. That's the beauty of Zionism, is that Zionism is not just a movement to return the Jewish people to their ancestral homeland, but it's the Jewish people have returned to history. They are no longer the objects, but the subjects, the writers of history. That's why sovereignty is so very important. One of my favorite Jewish heroes and leaders, Menachem Begin. Menachem Begin in 1970s gave a speech in Yiddish. The speech has been translated to, "We were all born in Jerusalem." And he ends the speech with Zionism, right? What is Zionism? Zionism is our flag, ancestral land, army, sovereignty, human dignity. These are his 5 things. Zionism to him is, it's not, a flag is political, it's just a political manifestation of a country. But we didn't want just a country. We wanted a country that's our ancestral homeland. It's not just any place. It's not Uganda, right? It has to be our ancestral homeland. Army. army. We are no longer going to export our safety to another people, army. And fourth is sovereignty. We are the writers. We are in charge of this land. And the fifth is human dignity. And sometimes I think that that isn't even better than pride. A lot of people talk about Jewish pride. I like this. I'm playing and toying around with Jewish dignity right now. How do we teach our kids? As I say, I started today with this idea to stand very tall, to not apologize for our success. Yes, we are successful. Yes, Israel's powerful. Do not apologize for that. But how do we get there? And I know it may have been a radical statement to have started this way, that using Jewish values has not produced strong Jews. So I'm just going to end here. And I would love to be in conversation now with the Cantor and obviously any other questions you all may have. And I apologize for the interruptions.
We barely heard the interruptions. Thank you so much, Naya. That is fabulous. You've answered so many questions that I had for you. I wanted to explore the idea that, hey, was Jewish education, if not broken, flawed prior to October 7th? And you've addressed that. One of the things that I really love about two of the things that I really love is, and you underlined them towards the end, the Jewish values. We love Jewish values everywhere we go. Jewish values. And as you said, that doesn't make it. There's nothing particular about it. But what was fascinating to me towards the end, when you talked about those 5 items, I think I'm missing one, but the ancestral homeland, the army, the ability to defend ourselves and not rely on others to do so for us, the sovereignty, and human dignity.
Human dignity. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and human dignity. All those you did not mention, which I'm glad you didn't. But what about this government or that government in Israel? What about that policy and that policy? I've heard so many people in the States, and for those of you who don't know, I'm Canadian, and so I talk about America sort of from within and a bit of from without. And so when I came here in 2017, was really struck by that sense that it's almost a support that what I've seen here, and some people may agree with me, some people may not, but what I've noticed in the States is that there tended to be a lot of support for Israel would be dependent on the politics. Do I agree? Do I not agree with this or that? And what you're underlining, which is a way that my parents taught me when I was a child from Morocco, both of them were immigrants, Moroccan on one side, German on the other. And what they taught me was a love of my people, a love for my identity, and a love for the fact that after 2,000 years of homelessness, we have returned. And you're focusing on that. Can you speak a little bit to that nuance? Is that a mistake? Should educators be engaging a little more in the politics, a little less in the politics and the big scope of things? What's your take?
I get very emotional, so I'm going to temper myself a bit. I think I don't quite understand why Jewish educators are so compelled to talk about Israeli politics. I don't see any other, like the French people sitting there, or the Armenian people discussing, the politics of their country to such a degree as the Jewish people are. I think I have a lot of opinions. I think it's look, I am a Jew in the diaspora. I call myself a Zionist in the diaspora, which is kind of an oxymoron because all Zionists should really live in Israel. But because I have not served in the IDF, and because I do not pay the taxes, I do not live in Israel, I don't think that we should be talking about what's happening internally in Israeli politics. I don't feel that I have a right to. But here's the thing, and this is, again, to your point about what do you love? Do you love the Israel that is or the Israel that does? Right? This is that, is the Israel the country in the Jewish people? Whatever my politics, for instance, was it a year ago, where Benny Gantz formed a coalition with a very radical Muslim group. I did not stop supporting Israel because I love Israel, no matter who the prime minister is in Israel. I love Israel. And so it makes me pause. Why are they so obsessed with discussing Israeli politics? And this, I think, is once again this tension between the Israel that is and the Israel that does. What do I mean by that? The Israel that is. Israel is, if you finish the sentence, is the homeland of the Jewish people. Israel is an indigenous homeland. Israel is the ancestral homeland. If you continue, Israel does. Israel is a democracy. Israel is good to minorities. Israel. So what you're doing is you're taking your own your politics, and you're basically copy pasting it onto Israel. If Israel aligns with your politics, the Israel that does what you would do, you would support. But what is it that you support about Israel? Is it the do Israel or the is Israel? I don't know if I'm articulating myself 100%, but this tension, and I found it, if I may be so blunt, with, so I'm a former Soviet-speaking Jew, and you are a Sephardi Jew, right?
Right.
I noticed that us Russian-speaking Jews, Persian Jews, Iraqi Jews, we have a relationship where we love Israel no matter what. I found that with American Jewry, it's very different. For instance, if I ask them, what makes you proud about Israel? Most of the time they'll say, because it's a democracy and it treats its minorities really well, and it's all the does. It starts the listing all the does. And if I ask, my grandfather or my mother, why do you love Israel? She's like, because it's the homeland of the Jewish people, right? So it's just, again, it's the Israel that is versus the Israel that does. And one of the things that I think is dangerous is when you rely too much on the Israel that does. What will happen when Israel, quote unquote, does something that doesn't align with your personal, politics? Will you then jettison Israel? These are real questions. So I think it's unhealthy, and I don't think that we should be. Look, I love freedom, all free. So if you want to discuss Israeli politics, fine. But if that's the only thing that you're putting in front of Jewish youth, don't expect them to come out proud Jews. If you are putting in front of them guest speakers who say Israel's turning into white supremacy country, neo-Nazi country, what do you expect people to think afterwards? They're going to walk out the door and go, gosh, I'm so proud of Israel. No.
Thank you, Naya. I have a follow-up of maybe one or two questions on this. How have Jewish schools been teaching Zionism? Do you think they've done a good job of it? And by the way, I have a hard time using the word Zionism, not for the same reasons that people who hate us do, but because to me, it is the same thing as Judaism to me. It's Jewish identity. It's a word that we've used because it's a political movement that led to this particular state. But to me, it's one and the same. But do you feel that the schools and the states, I know there's all kinds of variety, but overall, have they done a decent job on that aspect?
Let's define schools for just a second. First, I don't want to paint all schools. There's Jewish Orthodox schools, there's Jewish Reform schools. There's such a plethora and diversity of different schools. But let's talk about the schools that I'm most familiar with, and that would be conservative, modern Orthodox, Reformed Jewish day schools, because I can't speak about what's happening in the Hasidic schools, in the Satmar community. I don't know. They don't want to use the word Zionism. They find it triggering. When I go to I speak at high schools quite often, and in my emails, I have to think, should I say, I would like to talk about Zionism? They don't want to use that word. And what I say is, it's not shame on us, American Jewish educators, legacy organization, institutions, for not teaching what you just said, Cantor, that to be a Jew is to be a Zionist. It's one and the same. One of the lessons that I do with teenagers a lot is something I call proto-Zionism. So before the word, like Moses was a Zionist. Yes, Moses was a Zionist. Shalom Aleichem was a Zionist, right? So taking that word that is part of the 19th century and saying, look, just because the word was coined in 1892, I believe, just because it was coined in 1892 doesn't mean that all the Jews who've been praying and longing, and that poem, My Heart is in the East and I'm at the Outmost West, by Yehuda Halevi, he's a Zionist, but that word didn't exist before. And that's the kind of work we need to do with our students, is to say that we need to explain to them Zionism is not a political movement. Zionism is identity. To be a Jew is a Zionist. And so unfortunately, they don't want to use that word. That's what I found a lot so much, is that they are afraid of using the word Zionist. And I'm as I'm speaking with you right now, I almost feel empathy for the fact that I have Rahmonas, if you guys know what Rahmonas is in Yiddish. I almost have Rahmonas on the state of Jewish education, that we have done such a poor job in relaying the beauty and the centrality of Zion, to the Jewish identity. So my personal experience has been quite disheartening, in that Jewish educators don't want to use that word, but not for the same reason that you, because for you, Zionist is Jew and Jew is Zionist. It's because they find it to be triggering, and they don't want, oh, we don't want to be political. I'm like, I want to tear my hair out, because
I've
it's
already
not
done so.
politics. It's not about politics. Okay.
Little joke about hair there, everyone. Look, it's not about politics. So I have a few follow-up questions, and then I'd like to turn it to everyone here. But because it can be too noisy to have everyone unmute, I will invite you to ask questions in the chat. You can start doing so now, and in a few minutes we'll start reading and taking questions from there. So there's a few things I would like to follow up with. One is advocacy. You spoke about advocacy earlier, and I was watching something you said in another interview, and you spoke about advocacy, and you tried to explain what that means, and you gave an example of what someone might say to accuse. You said when you talk to a student, you might accuse them, about shoplifting or something. Do you remember this story that you use? Can you recount that and sort of explain what you mean by advocacy to us?
Yes, absolutely. I think that advocacy is a kind of unfortunate word, but let's use that word, advocacy. What I found in the Jewish/Israel advocacy world is a lot of explaining and being on the defense. Israel is an apartheid. Well, it's not an apartheid because da-da-da-da-da. Israel is a systemically racist country. Well, it's not because 1, 2, 3, 4. And one day I tried this experiment with my students. I came into the room and I said, let's call my student Racheli. And I said, Racheli, I just saw your mom shoplifting. I just saw her, and she was in shock. She was like, what? Yeah, I said, I was at the supermarket. I was at Vons. This in Los Angeles, we have Vons. I said, and I saw her. And she said, well, no. And she got really upset at me, very upset, because I came in quite serious. And she said, no. And I said, are you doubting what I saw? Are you doubting my perspective, my narrative? And she said, I know my mother better than you know my mother. My mother would never do that. There was a pause. Everybody was very confused. They thought I had lost my mind. But in that moment, I wanted them to feel what they would feel when somebody says that about Israel. She didn't go, interestingly enough, she didn't say, well, you know what? My mother doesn't have a past of being in jail. My mother doesn't have a record of ever getting a ticket. She's always kept the speed limit. She didn't say any of that. She went to, don't you dare. I know my mom better than you know my mom. Who are you? How dare you? And I asked them, I challenged them. I said, this I call the Israel is not my this is not my mother moment. My mother wouldn't do that. Israel wouldn't do that. Stop being on the defense to such a degree where you're looking for the most squeaky clean version of Israel. Let me tell you, that is not true, because if you look at Resolution 181, you will see that in the year 1973, stand tall, because that's why am I using this as an example? It happened to me in college. I walked by at a demonstration of Israel apartheid display, terrible. Israel practices apartheid. Israel kills Palestinian babies. And I remember I was, 20? I walked by and I said, that's not my people. That's not my country. No. And I'd never been to Israel. My father wouldn't let me go. The first time I went was I was 27. And how did I know does that mean that Jewish people are saints? No. Zev Jabotinsky says we have our prostitutes, we have our criminals, we have plenty of it. We have our murderers, we do. Am I thinking that Israel is land perfect forever? But no, we do not practice apartheid. And no, we are not baby killers. That's blood libel. So that is what I'm looking for when I work with, and I saw one of the questions, yes, I also work with adults. I do, when I work with advocacy, I want people to come to that. No, Israel is not. It's not, let me prove to you why Israel is an apartheid state. No, that's no, it's not true. It's a lie. I don't know where you heard that. So yeah, that's what happened with the student exercise.
I love that story. And in this story, and something you said earlier regarding schools that are uncomfortable using the word Zionism, I feel that we've fallen victim to letting other people dictate our narrative, tell our narrative, instead of us being our own storytellers and say, this is who I am, this is my story, and I insist upon it. And that comes from knowledge, as you said, and it comes from pride or dignity, if you will. There was something else. So also, what should we be teaching our youth about what their relationship is as American Jews to Israel?
What should we be teaching about what their relationship should be?
Yes, if anything, like how should you see, hey, you kid over here, whether you have a relative in Israel or not, whether you love, this latest pop song from Israel or not, how should they relate to Israel? What are we? And look, one reason why I'm asking this is you said something about you mentioned some other cultures. One thing that I've noticed is, or one thing I tend to go to when we get into politics about Israel is I say, look, nobody asks Italian Americans who are super proud of their Italian culture and Italian heritage, hey, what do you think of the latest, the prime minister, the right-wing prime minister that they elected recently? What do you think of that? What do you think of the treatment of, Libyan migrants or whatever that is? Nobody does that. You're still proud of it. Nobody asks Irish Americans who are proud, especially on St. Patrick's Day, hey, what did you think of the IRA bombing, engaging in terrorism in those days? How do you feel about it? We didn't accuse people. And they still had this pride in identity. So I'm already leading. You can see where I'm going with this. But, if students are, if it's not politics, what is it? And I think you already addressed it, but how should kids be understanding what their relationship is to Israel today?
So I'll tell you a story. When I was a young girl, and if you recall, anybody on this call, Saddam Hussein in the 90s sent weapons in the form of chemical weapons to Israel. And I remember my mom was crying and I didn't understand. And she was listening to the news, and we have relatives in Israel. And I remember we received pictures of the children sleeping in masks. So because of the chemical weapons. And my mom was very upset. And I asked my mom, like, why are you so upset? And she told me, I'll never forget. She said, Naya, I want you to remember something. And she held up her hand and she said, the Jewish people are like a hand. And I said, okay. And she said, in her like Russian, morose philosophy, if I cut a finger, where do I feel the pain? And I said, well, the whole hand, I guess. And she said, that's the Jewish people. That's who we are. The Jewish people are hurting in Israel right now, but we're hurting everywhere. That stayed with me. It just remained and impressed upon me a deep sense of responsibility and a deep sense of also pride that we are such a people, that we are connected. We transcend time and space. And so if we could just lean into Jewish peoplehood when we teach, it's another concept that we didn't really get to explore today so much. But what does it mean to be a Jew? One of the things that I teach is that Judaism is not just a religion, it's an ethnicity, right? In fact, I think it's even more an ethnicity than a religion. We are called Bnei Israel, Am Israel. You know, the word Jew is not ever mentioned in the Torah, ever. Right? We are known as Bnei Israel, Am Yisrael, the people of Israel, the children of Israel. One of the things that I think would be so beneficial to Jewish educators or education is to start leaning into our ethnic roots and having this idea that we are a small people, but a large family.
So there's, in addition, thank you, beautifully said. There's one thing that I harp on in my own life, and people, I think, affectionately roll their eyes at me. I hope affectionately. And that is, when teaching Hebrew, I believe very strongly that we should be teaching accent as much as possible. I understand we're in the States. I understand that. I understand that people in France are going to have a French accent when they try to speak Hebrew. But my daughter goes to a French school here. You know, French is our first language. So she goes to a French school, and everyone in her class back in kindergarten was she and I think another student were the only French speakers. Everyone else, American, ethnically from other places as well. Each one of them was taught to roll their R's in a French way and pronounce French in a certain, more accurate way. And they don't say, j'aime parler français. They don't say that. They're trying hard to follow the authoritative French, or close to the authoritative French. And I find that Jewish schools don't make any effort at all in that. I wish, and I think it's a simple thing, that if we were to insist upon it, teach Hebrew, the same people who speak, people we know will have a decent Spanish accent, right? They're not going to go me llamo whatever Espanol. They're going to try to say it a little better. I feel that by doing that, we kind of teach in here that this is a sound that's more Middle Eastern. It's not an American sound. And it kind of tells them the authoritative Hebrew that you're striving for, even if you don't get there, is what they're doing over there in Israel. So that's my little, that's one of the things that I think is important. I don't understand why Spanish can be taught with an accent, with a proper accent, and French as well, and German as well. And with Hebrew, we don't even try. That's one. The other thing that I wanted to ask you about, and it's fascinating, and I think that it's important that everyone listening and watching pay attention to, that at no point has Naya talked about, that I noticed, anti-Semitism. This has been sort of empowering. The way you've been talking about it is, here's how we own, here's where we talk about dignity, the values. It's not about a reaction to hate around us. However, all this that you're talking about enables us to combat the hate. So can you tell me, perhaps, in light of the wave of anti-Semitism that we've seen since October 7th, what, if anything, about your perspective has changed? Or is it more about, hey, it should be clear that we need to make a shift?
We need to make a shift. And to your point exactly, you don't fight anti-Semitism by teaching people about anti-Semitism. You have to go to create strong dignity, knowledge. Those people will be able to withstand the tide of anti-Semitism. Why are they unable to right now? Why is everybody scrambling? Why is everybody, oh my God, social media is all about combating anti-Semitism. I have to move classrooms, so just 1 second. Cantor, if you can continue.
Of course. So everyone, if I know that some people have been adding questions in the chat, I'll try to field them. If you have more, please go ahead. Naya has to leave us in about 15 minutes. So I'll try to take some of these questions, and there are only a few, but feel free to add some more. I think that everyone watching this, I think you've joined me. Just, most of you don't have, I don't know if you do, but not everyone here has children in elementary and high school, and yet you're here. I think that it'd be fair to say that we've seen the October 7th massacre, the effects of that, the ripple effect. There's this shift everywhere. Everything around us is up for question. Is up. We're looking at what have we been doing wrong? How come we didn't see this? And how do we handle it? I thought our home was, I see many people I thought our home was on this political left, and so many institutions and organizations have sort of abandoned or turned theirs. And one of the other elements is Jewish education. How do we make sure that our kids are equipped to handle this as they grow older? We see universities, and they are hotbeds of, they're hostile to Jewish students. And I worry, and perhaps Naya can speak to this, I worry about what that means for my child growing up and going to university in 10, 15 years from now. If it looks like this now, is it going to be so bad? Or is it going to be so bad to the point that Jews are going to say, you know what? I'm being told in the classic sort of way it used to happen as well, that if I abandon my attachment to my deity, my sense of being rooted in the land of Israel, my sense of peoplehood, I will gain acceptance, and they will treat me, because that's the price for acceptance in many of these universities. You're welcome, as long as you don't bring your Zionism. So I don't know if you want to talk to that, Naya, or we can take some questions.
I just want to finish up. I apologize for the interruption. I just want to finish up about the question that you asked. I didn't actually even notice, but you're absolutely, I don't think I did speak about anti-Semitism, which is so interesting because I study anti-Semitism, and I consider myself obsessive in the sense on wanting to understand anti-Semitism, but I didn't. I look around, and the mushrooming effect of all these organizations and social media combating anti-Semitism, and looking at it from the side, I think, wow, the Jewish community is really struggling. They don't really know, how do you combat anti-Semitism? Different methods, different strategies. But I think you answered it. I think that if instead of starting with let's build out a program to help people combat anti-Semitism, no, let's build out a program to help our Jewish youth understand who they are as Jews first. Then after they understand who they are, they'll understand that anti-Zionism is an attack on Jewish identity, an attack on their ancestral, national, ethnic Jewish identity.
Thank you. Not in order. I see Michael says, speaking as an Italian American, I have been asked about Berlusconi on many occasions, but I will say that I suspect that you were asked what your opinion, and it wasn't conditional on whether or not, as a result of your feelings, whether you should be a proud Italian, right? There's that. So I don't know that's much of it's a question, but it's a point. Let me see if there's another question here. My biggest point, Raisa says, is we always have to be proud of Jewishness and protect it in any way we can in our connection to Israel. Okay. Lisa Eckstein, sorry. Are there a few books on Jewish history that you would recommend?
So my favorite book on Jewish history / anti-Semitism is by Joseph Telushkin and Dennis Prager, Why the Jews? The longest, Why the Jews? The Reason for Anti-Semitism. The best book I ever read. Least academic, but the best. Okay. That's one. In terms of Jewish history, Gil Troy is a wonderful historian. Why I'm a Zionist, and it's all about Jewish identity. I'm more than happy to send a list over. A more academic book that I like is David Nirenberg's book, Anti-Judaism, and where he traces the birth of anti-Semitism in Western civilization. But in terms of Jewish history, interestingly enough, Joseph Telushkin and Dennis Prager, even the book is titled The Longest Hate, Why the Jews? It's about anti-Semitism, but it actually turns out to be a book on Jewish history.
Let me see if there's another message here. Okay. One of the things that you've mentioned a couple of people just now that in where I am here in Portland, Oregon, some people might bristle at. Oh, you said someone who's more conservative. You mentioned an author who's more conservative, more right wing. And what do you say to them? what do you say to, educators? I suspect that a kid in grade 5 in 5th grade is not going to make that distinction, but their parents might. Or one of the things that
Yeah,
I've known. Yeah, go ahead.
I employ the Socratic method wherever with whatever, which is interrogation, and inquiry based. I ask them, okay, well, can you tell me what bothers you about this particular person?
Yeah.
What is it about this person that you find problematic? Without labeling, can we not label? Just can we? Okay, he's conservative, let's say. Okay, great. What is it? Can you tell me a view that you find really abhorrent? Maybe I'm missing something. Usually, it that kind of it goes on and on and on, and usually people are much more open to and you're not asking it in a malicious way. You're just really wondering what is it about this person that you find difficult to read.
Right. Thank you. One thing that I would add as well, on my perspective, is that what we've seen since October 7th is that who we thought were allies weren't always allies, and people who are, I would encourage members of my congregation and my community to look beyond simple, that's on the other team, this is on this team, right and left that way. You don't have to agree with politics fully to examine whether or not someone is saying something valid that can help, certainly on Judaism. And one of the examples that I give, and people might bristle, is, here's Ben Shapiro, conservative right-wing person, with a huge platform, since October 7th, almost daily using his platform to fight for Israel and the Jewish people. And I respect that. And you can dismiss and some things and take some other things individually, but I would caution people from dismissing outright, and doing, approaching it the way Naya said. Ron Fromstein. Hi, Naya and Cantor Eyal. Do you have any thoughts about what adults interested in furthering and deepening their Jewish education, wherever they may be, can and should do?
So funny. It's a great question, because I do spend most of my time with youth, with adults. And I want to just stress that as I am speaking with you all today and reflecting on how is it that I hold certain views, I can't give everyone my mother and my grandmother, but it is really, I would say, you as adults here, if you're grandparents, if you're parents, you have an amazing opportunity to affect, to inspire your grandchildren and children to have these conversations in the car over dinner. In terms of adult, I go to books a lot of times. I love, we spoke about this with Cantor Eyal. I absolutely love Ruth Weiss. Ruth Weiss is a mentor of mine, somebody I deeply respect, also from Montreal, by the way. And she wrote a book called Jews and Power. And I really urge everyone here to read this book, Jews and Power. And it begins with a very sobering sentence, which is that Jewish history really changed after we lost our sovereignty. We started to have a very vexed relationship with power, in the sense that now when we have power and sovereignty, we are in many ways unprepared and want to apologize. It's a wonderful book, Apologize for That Power. And so I would recommend as a book for adults who want to learn more about these concepts that we were discussing today, such as having not just our flag, not just our human dignity, but also our army and our sovereignty. This is something that Ruth Weiss explores.
Thank you, Naya. Do you think that Jewish educators will change? That schools in the States are going to make some of these changes that you're talking about? What do you feel?
I don't know. I hate to tell you, I recently was invited as a guest, and somebody asked me, how are you doing after October 7th as a Jew? And I didn't know that this person was going to ask me this question. So it was like, how am I doing as a Jew? How are we doing? And I said, well, it depends on the day. The answer to that question will change day to day. But one thing I'm very shocked about is how much people have short-term memory. And what I thought for sure would this type of massacre, the enormity, the the savagery, that this would shake people up. And indeed, I think in the first week, I was like, oh my God, maybe people will understand. And what I see now, the equivocation, the moral cowardice, these universities that send statements that we share our pain with both communities. I bet you that deep down they know that they're moral cowards. And regarding Jewish education, I see all these Jewish education workshops processing October 7th, but I worry that they're applying the Jewish value lens. That's what I worry. I see a lot of just conversations. How do we teach about trauma again, about what happened? But if I were a fly on the wall, I think I'd be very dismayed, because I think they'd be approaching it from a methodology that's rooted in Jewish values.
Yeah. And this is, I mean, I asked that for that reason. I worry that we're not going to change. And I fear that I think there are three things that have to happen after October 7th. One is as a people. Okay. One is about education. I kind of addressed this earlier. One is, as a community, as individuals, we need to identify who have stood by us, who our allies are, basically, and be ready to change based on facts, not based on belief system, looking at, well, who stood with us and who didn't, and who's willing to kind of see the demise of Israel, basically another Holocaust, and who, reassess that. Two, demand better from our institutions, whether they're schools, whether they're political parties, whether they're other kinds of institutions. Same thing. Say, look, I am not supporting you unless I feel seen. And the third is this transformation of Jewish education. And I worry that if we don't address these three things, we're not going to move from where we are now. And so I do believe that in the future, there'll be plenty of elements of Jewish schools that won't make this change, but will there be enough? So perhaps will there be enough? And two, if they don't, what's your outlook on American Jewry? If we don't make internal changes, what do you feel?
First of all, you're talking to a Russian speaker. Everything is depressing and can only get worse. So unfortunately, so if you are looking for an uplifting answer here, look, I can't give you, I'm not a seer, I'm not a prophet. I don't know. I worry very much so. As I said just earlier, a few minutes ago, I see the burgeoning of so many Jewish initiatives around fighting anti-Semitism, and how should we talk about Israel after October 7th. And I worry again that those important questions are being misplaced because of incorrect methodologies. But at the same time, I was speaking to my cousin on the phone, because she's kind of she's alike. She and I think, alike, and I was, bemoaning the state of affairs. And she said, Naya, it just takes one person. You're an educator. What you're doing, and you don't know. I'm not saying I'm an Alexander Solzhenitsyn or an Natan Sharansky, but it took one person to do so much amazing things. And all of you on this call or listening to this podcast, you have so much power in when you could be that person that affects a future Jewish leader by telling them about Jewish peoplehood, by doing what my mom said to me when she told me about that the Jewish people are a hand. And I carry that with me, both as a responsibility, but a great privilege, that the Jewish people are always connected by time. It doesn't matter of space or time. So we have a lot of power. That's the positive. I'm not sure what I can tell you about the future of American Jewry. I don't know. I can't. I'd rather not.
I hear you, and I'll say one more thing. I know you have to leave very shortly. That to push back on the idea that you're not a prophet, I want to say that prophets in our sacred texts had truths to impart to their communities. They looked at the politics around their society and they kind of gave warnings to people. It's not simply that they were messengers of God and they were telling gloom and doom and this is exactly what's going to happen. This is read the signs around you. I think so. We're blessed. We're lucky to have people like Naya showing us a way and giving us, I think, a better way, a better alternative in terms of education that will empower our students. And all that she and other, people who have truths to impart to our people, all that they can do is tell us and lay it out for us. And we have to take that and go, yes, I think that I need to make a change. Yes, I think my school needs to make a change. Yes, I think whatever that might be. The messages are there. It's up to us to not enforce, but to make these things happen. And it behooves us to.
Right, because you are right about that, because a couple weeks ago I went to Milwaukee. I was invited, and we did a Shabbaton for adults and we did a Shabbaton for youth, and we built out the program there. And so there's a lot there is a lot we can do. There's a lot everyone here can do. You're right.
And there's an urgency, I would say. No, now on that troubling note, I want to wrap things up and say, usually I announce what we're going to do next week. I don't have guests yet aligned for next week, but we're working on it, and we're making this a weekly thing, Thursday around noon. Please pay attention to notifications and what have you. This session will be on, I think it will be on YouTube, if you're okay with that, Naya, at some point, and will also be on our podcast, Proudly Jewish. There'll be a notification to the congregation with links, and it has links to all the previous ones, and we'll continue this. I think these are ongoing discussions that we need to have to build up our people and try to get some answers. Naya, you've been so wonderful. I wish I had a great education, but I wish that more of us could benefit from your curriculum and your perspectives, and that what your the vision that you have is something that I think I would love to see many more students benefit from.
I'll just end with thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Cantor. Thank you for listening. But I'll end with what I began with, which is lean into Jewish collective memory and peoplehood. That we are people, we are that hand. We are a small nation and a big family. I want to leave you with that. So thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you
You guys are blessed to be in the shul with Cantor Eyal. So in Oregon, of all places.
Of all places. Well, thank you so much
for very much.
All right. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. Stay tuned for more episodes coming up. All right. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you.